The warning siren screamed through the colony of New Montana, a sound that Lisa Moore had hoped she would never hear. She ran through the corridors of the main settlement building, her boots pounding against the metal floor as people rushed past her in both directions. Some were heading to the shelters. Others, like her, were running toward their stations. Lisa was the chief sensor operator for New Montana, a job that sounded more impressive than it actually was. The colony had only 3,000 people, most of them farmers and miners trying to make a life on a world that was barely habitable. The sensor station was a small room filled with outdated equipment that Earth had sent them 5 years ago. But right now, that outdated equipment was showing her something that made her blood run cold. "How many?" Captain Dan Miller asked as he burst into the sensor room behind her. He was the colony's security chief, a former soldier who had retired to the frontier to get away from war. That plan wasn't working out very well for him today. "Hundreds," Lisa said, her fingers flying over the controls. "Maybe thousands. They're still coming out of hyperspace." Dan looked at the screen and his face went pale. He had seen combat footage of the Devourers before. Everyone had. Biomechanical monsters had destroyed 12 alien civilizations in the past 6 months, turning entire star systems into dead zones. Their ships looked like a nightmare, all twisted metal and organic tissue fused together in ways that shouldn't be possible. "How long do we have?" Dan asked. "They're at the edge of the system, moving fast, maybe 6 hours before they reach orbit." 6 hours. Dan pulled out his communicator. Not enough time to evacuate, not enough time for help to arrive. Lisa knew he was right. The nearest Earth military base was 3 weeks away at best speed. The Galactic Council had ships closer, but they wouldn't come. They had written off New Montana the moment the Devourers entered the system, just like they had written off dozens of other worlds. "I'm calling Earth anyway," Dan said. "They need to know what's happening." He left the room, and Lisa stayed at her station, watching the swarm of red dots on her screen grow larger. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, safe in a school in Denver. At least Katie would be okay. That was something. The next few hours passed in a blur. The colony's defense satellites, all 8 of them, powered up and moved into position. They had missiles that were 20 years old and laser batteries that could barely scratch military-grade armor. Against the Devourers, they might as well be throwing rocks. Dan organized the colonists who had military training into a defense force. There were 43 of them, armed with rifles and whatever weapons they could find. It was pointless, but it was better than doing nothing. Lisa stayed at her sensors, tracking the approaching doom. The Devourer fleet was massive, bigger than anything she had ever seen. They moved in a swarm pattern, thousands of ships working together like a single organism. The Council's military analysts thought the Devourers had some kind of hive mind, but nobody knew for sure. "Lisa." Dan's voice came through her headset. "We're getting something from Earth. It's marked Priority Alpha. Put it through." A voice she didn't recognize came through the speakers. It was a woman, calm and professional. "New Montana, this is Admiral Kate Sullivan of Earth Defense Command. We have received your distress call. Help is on the way." Lisa felt a surge of hope, quickly crushed by reality. "Admiral, with respect, there's no way you can get here in time. We have maybe 4 hours before they reach orbit." "I understand, Captain Moore. But help is closer than you think. Hold your position, protect your people, we will be there." The transmission ended. Lisa stared at the console, confused. How could Earth have ships close enough to help? There were no military vessels within weeks of New Montana, unless— "Dan, did we ever get updated on Earth's fleet movements?" "Not in the last month," Dan replied. "Why?" "The Admiral said help is close, but that's impossible unless they've deployed ships we don't know about." Dan was quiet for a moment. "Maybe they have. The Council's been keeping secrets. Maybe we have too." Lisa didn't have time to think about it. The Devourers were 3 hours out now, and they were starting to move into attack formation. She watched them on the sensors, trying not to think about what was going to happen to everyone she knew. 2 hours passed. The colonists were in the shelters now, sealed behind doors that wouldn't stop the Devourers for more than a few minutes. Dan and his defense force were spread out across the settlement, waiting with their useless weapons. The defense satellites had armed their missiles, ready to fire the moment the enemy came into range. Lisa sat alone in the sensor room, watching the end approach. The Devourers were 1 hour out, then 30 minutes, then 15. Lisa. Dan's voice was tight. Anything from Earth? Nothing, I'm sorry, Dan. Yeah, me too. The Devourers reached the outer orbit zone. Lisa's sensors showed them spreading out, preparing to blanket the planet with their forces. She had seen the footage of other colonies when the Devourers attacked. It wasn't quick. They didn't just destroy. They consumed everything, breaking down matter itself to fuel their endless expansion. All units stand by, Dan said over the general channel. His voice was steady even now. Make them work for it. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of Katie. At least her daughter would remember her as someone who didn't run. Then every alarm in the sensor room went off at once. Lisa's eyes snapped open. Her screens were going crazy, showing readings that didn't make any sense. Space itself seemed to be bending, folding in ways that violated every law of physics she knew. What the hell? She whispered. 7 signatures appeared on her sensors. They hadn't come from hyperspace. They hadn't traveled through normal space. They had simply appeared, as if reality had opened a door and let them through. Dan, are you seeing this? What am I looking at, Lisa? I don't know. 7 ships, big ones. They just appeared between us and the Devourers. Lisa switched to visual sensors, using the colony's telescopes to get an actual look at whatever had arrived. What she saw made her forget how to breathe. The ships were enormous, each one at least twice the size of the largest Council warship she had ever seen. But it wasn't their size that shocked her. It was what they were made of. They looked like they were built from solidified night. Dark matter, she realized, though that should have been impossible. Dark matter couldn't hold a stable form. It was invisible, intangible, something you could only detect through its gravitational effects. But these ships were made of it, somehow woven into physical structures that her sensors could barely detect. The design was like nothing she had ever seen. The ships had smooth, flowing lines that seemed to shift when you looked at them. There were no obvious weapons ports, no engine exhausts, nothing that marked them as military vessels. But Lisa could feel the power radiating from them even through her sensors. Lisa, what are those? Dan's voice was full of wonder. I think they're ours, Lisa said slowly. I think they're from Earth. The Devourers had noticed the new arrivals. Their swarm hesitated, which was something Lisa had never seen them do before. The biomechanical ships slowed their approach as if the hive mind was trying to analyze this unexpected development. One of the dark ships moved forward. It was graceful, sliding through space like a knife through water. Lisa checked her communications channels and found a new frequency opening up. New Montana, this is Captain Ryan Bell of the Earth warship Liberty's Dawn. We have the situation. Stay in your shelters. Liberty's Dawn, this is Captain Moore. What are you? What are those ships? There was a pause. Then Ryan's voice came back and Lisa could hear the smile in it. We're the reason Earth stopped begging the Council for help. Stand by. The Devourers made their decision. The swarm surged forward, thousands of ships accelerating toward the planet. They were going to ignore the 7 dark matter ships and overwhelm them through sheer numbers. It was a fatal mistake. The Liberty's Dawn fired first. Lisa watched on her sensors, trying to understand what she was seeing. There was no missile launch, no laser beam. Instead, space itself seemed to tear open in front of the ship. A wave of something that wasn't quite energy and wasn't quite matter rippled out from the dark warship. Where it touched the Devourer ships, they simply stopped existing. Not exploded, not destroyed. They were there one moment and gone the next, as if someone had erased them from reality. Hundreds of Devourer ships vanished in the first second. The other 6 human warships opened fire. 7 beams of impossible energy lanced through the Devourer swarm. The biomechanical ships tried to scatter, tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. The dark matter weapons didn't work like anything else in the galaxy. Lisa watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded. Battle wasn't even the right word. It was an execution. The Devourers, the unstoppable force that had crushed civilizations millions of years old, were being wiped out like insects. The hive mind tried different tactics. Some Devourer ships attempted to ram the human vessels. They couldn't get close. Some kind of field surrounded the dark matter warships, and anything that touched it was torn apart. Other Devourers tried to use their adaptive shielding, the same technology that had made them immune to Council weapons. It didn't help. 4 minutes after the human ships opened fire, the last Devourer vessel was destroyed. The swarm that should have consumed New Montana was reduced to scattered atoms drifting in the void. New Montana, this is Liberty's dawn. Threat neutralized. You are secure. Lisa sat in her chair, her hands shaking. Around her, the colony's communication channels erupted with voices, people crying and laughing and trying to understand what had just happened. Liberty's dawn, Lisa managed to say. Thank you. How did you do that? It's a long story, Captain Moore. The short version is that Earth got tired of being the weakest species in the galaxy. We decided to change that. Over the next hour, Lisa coordinated with the human warships as they swept the system for any remaining Devourer traces. There were none. The dark matter vessels had been thorough. Dan came to the sensor room, his face still showing shock. I've been a soldier for 20 years, he said quietly. I've never seen anything like that. Nobody has, Lisa replied. Dan, those are Earth ships. Our ships? When did we build something like that? I have no idea, but I'm damn glad we did. News of the battle spread fast. Within hours, every human colony in space knew what had happened at New Montana. Within days, the story reached the Galactic Council. That's when everything changed. The Council had been humanity's gateway to the stars. 8 months ago, Earth had been accepted as a member civilization, granted access to hyperspace technology and the basic knowledge needed to expand beyond the solar system. But it had been made very clear that humans were junior members, barely worth noticing. The Council was made up of 47 civilizations, some of them millions of years old. They had vast fleets, ancient knowledge, technology that seemed like magic. The Krethians alone had 10,000 warships. The Vorn Collective could manipulate quantum fields with their minds. The Saranth had mastered genetic engineering to the point where they could design entire ecosystems. And they had all looked at humanity with something between pity and contempt. Humans were primitives, still using chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. They needed to be taught, to be guided by their betters. Now those same civilizations were demanding to know how humanity had built warships that made their fleets obsolete. Commander Jacob Hayes got the assignment to explain it to them. He was a good choice for the job. Jacob had been a diplomat before he joined the military, and he knew how to talk to aliens without starting a war. He was also one of the few people outside of the Dark Matter Project who knew the full story. Jacob stood in his quarters aboard the Earth vessel Horizon's Edge, looking at his uniform in the mirror. The ship was on its way to the Galactic Council Station, a massive structure that floated between star systems. He would be there in 6 hours, and then he would have to face the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy and tell them that humanity didn't need them anymore. His assistant, Lieutenant Amy Carson, knocked on his door. "Sir, we're getting messages from the Council. Lots of messages. Let me guess. They want answers. They want everything. Ship specifications, weapons data, propulsion systems. High Chancellor Varix is particularly insistent." Jacob smiled without humor. Varix was the leader of the Krethian Empire, the most powerful single civilization in the Council. He was used to getting what he wanted. "Tell the Chancellor that I will address the full Council when we arrive, not before." Amy hesitated. "Sir, he's threatening sanctions against Earth, trade restrictions, technology embargoes. He can threaten all he wants. What's he going to do, cut us off from Council technology? We just proved we don't need it." Amy left, and Jacob went back to staring at his uniform. He was nervous, he could admit that. The Council had the power to make Earth's life very difficult. They controlled most of the major trade routes. They had knowledge that humanity still needed. Making them angry was risky. But they had made a mistake when they treated humans like children. They had refused to share real technology, refused to take Earth scientists seriously, refused to believe that a young species might have something valuable to contribute. And now they were paying the price for that arrogance. The Horizon's Edge docked at the Council station exactly on schedule. Jacob walked through the airlock with Amy at his side. They were met by a Krethian protocol officer whose skin was shifting through colors that Jacob's translator identified as anxiety. "Commander Hayes, the Council is waiting. Please follow me." The Council chamber was designed to intimidate. Jacob had been here once before during Earth's admission ceremony. It was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness. The delegates sat in rising tiers, looking down at whoever stood in the center. It made you feel small, which was the point. Today, every seat was filled. All 47 civilizations had sent their senior representatives. Jacob could see Varix at the center of the highest tier, his massive form radiating authority. Next to him was the Vorn Collective's prime intellect, a being of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. Elder Crane of the Sorinth sat on the other side, his ancient face unreadable. Jacob walked to the center of the chamber. Amy took her position at a nearby console, ready to display any data the council demanded. The chamber fell silent. High Chancellor Varix spoke first. His voice boomed through the space, amplified by technology that was older than human civilization. Commander Hayes, humanity will explain the weapons deployed at New Montana. You will provide complete specifications of your warships. You will share all research data related to dark matter manipulation. This is not a request. This is a demand of the Galactic Council. Jacob looked up at the tiers of alien faces. He could see anger, fear, and calculation in their expressions. They were used to being in control, used to being the ones with all the power. The idea that a species they had dismissed as primitive could threaten that control terrified them. High Chancellor, Jacob said calmly, with respect I decline. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Translators struggled to keep up with the chaos. Varix raised his hand for silence, but it took several minutes before the noise died down. You decline. Varix's voice was dangerously quiet. You understand what you are saying. You refuse a direct order from the Galactic Council. I do. The Council Charter, Section 12, Paragraph 7, clearly states that member civilizations have the right to develop defensive technologies without Council oversight or approval. Humanity exercised that right. We owe the Council no explanation and certainly no access to our military secrets. Amy pulled up the relevant section of galactic law on the displays around the chamber. Jacob had studied the charter carefully. The ancient civilizations had written the rules to protect their own advantages, never imagining that a younger race might use those same laws against them. A Vorn delegate rose, its crystalline body pulsing with agitation. Defensive technologies. Your weapons could destroy our entire fleet in minutes. This goes far beyond defense. Then perhaps your fleet is inadequate, Jacob replied. That's not our problem. The chamber exploded again. A Sorinth delegate accused humanity of violating the spirit of the law. A Krethian admiral demanded that Earth's colonies be placed under Council military supervision. Other voices called for economic sanctions, technology restrictions, even military action against Earth. Jacob waited for the storm to pass. He had expected this reaction. The Council had built its power on technological superiority. Every civilization in the chamber had climbed to their position by having better weapons, better ships, better science than their competitors. The idea that humans, members for less than a year, could leap ahead of all of them was unthinkable, but it had happened anyway. Elder Crane finally spoke, his voice cutting through the chaos. Commander Hayes, please help us understand. How did humanity accomplish this? 8 months ago, you were still using fusion drives. Now you have warships built from dark matter itself. This represents a leap in capability that should take thousands of years. Jacob appreciated the Sorinth Elder's approach. It was a genuine question, not a demand. Elder Crane, we accomplished it because we had to. The Devourers reached our border. We knew the Council couldn't or wouldn't help us. We had 3 choices: run, surrender, or find a way to fight. We chose to fight. But the science, Crane pressed. Dark matter manipulation is theoretical even for the most advanced Council species. How did you make it practical? Jacob glanced at Amy, who pulled up a presentation they had prepared. It showed the basic timeline of Project Dark Matter, carefully edited to remove anything classified. 6 years ago, Earth scientists made a breakthrough in quantum field theory. It came from trying to solve a completely different problem, actually. We were trying to improve our hyperspace drives. What we found instead was a way to interact with dark matter using controlled quantum fluctuations. Impossible, the Vorn delegate said. We have studied quantum mechanics for 10 million years. There is no such interaction. With respect, maybe you were looking in the wrong place. Our scientists didn't have 10 million years of established theory telling them what was impossible. They just had a problem to solve and the freedom to try crazy ideas. Jacob could see that landing. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. They were starting to realize that humanity's youth might actually be an advantage. We built our first prototype 3 years ago, Jacob continued. It failed. The second one also failed. The third one worked for about 15 seconds before it tore itself apart. But we learned from each failure. We refined the theory, improved the engineering. By the time the Devourers reached our space, we had 7 operational warships. 7 ships, Varric said slowly. That defeated a Devourer swarm that destroyed 12 civilizations. Yes, and you will not share this technology with the Council. No, High Chancellor, we will not. Varric stood, his entire body radiating fury. Then humanity has chosen to make enemies of every civilization in this chamber. You cannot stand alone against the galaxy, Commander Hayes. Your 7 ships are impressive, but we have millions. If you will not cooperate, you will be forced to comply. Jacob had been waiting for this threat. It was time to show them why that would be a very bad idea. Admiral Sullivan, he said quietly, please join us. On the displays around the chamber, an image appeared. It showed space near the Council station, captured by the Horizon's Edge's sensors. And in that space, previously undetected, were 3 dark matter warships. The Council chamber went silent. High Chancellor Varric, Jacob said. I'd like you to meet Admiral Kate Sullivan, commander of the Lincoln's Pride. She and her fleet have been here since before we arrived. Your sensors didn't detect them because dark matter ships can manipulate their gravitational signatures. They're effectively invisible unless we want you to see them. Varric sat down slowly, his face showing the first real fear Jacob had seen. Now, Jacob continued, let's talk about what happens next. The Devourers are still out there, and they're still destroying everything in their path. Earth's dark matter fleet can stop them, but we can't be everywhere at once. We need the Council's support, your logistics, your intelligence networks, and you need our weapons. So you propose an alliance, Elder Crane said. I propose that we stop wasting time with threats and start working together. Humanity will deploy our fleet to defend Council space against the Devourers. In exchange, we want full voting rights in the Council, equal to any other civilization. We want protection for our colonies and fair trade agreements, and we keep our technology. Unacceptable, Varric growled. Then enjoy fighting the Devourers alone. See how that works out for you. Jacob turned to leave, Amy following behind him. They were halfway to the exit when Elder Crane called out. Commander Hayes, wait. Jacob stopped and turned back. The Sarinth Elder was standing now, looking at the other delegates. This council was founded on principles of mutual cooperation and shared survival. Yes, humanity has surprised us. Yes, they have power we did not anticipate. But the alternative to working with them is fighting both humanity and the Devourers. That is a war we cannot win. Other delegates began to speak, some agreeing with Crane, others still resistant. Jacob watched the debate unfold, knowing that this was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. It took 3 hours, but eventually, the Council voted to accept Earth's terms. It wasn't unanimous. Varric and several other delegates voted against it, their pride wounded too deeply to accept the new reality. But enough civilizations saw the wisdom in Crane's words. Jacob left the Council station with a formal alliance agreement and a promise that human warships would begin deploying within the week. Amy was quiet on the shuttle ride back to the Horizon's Edge. You think they'll really accept us as equals? She asked finally. Some will, some won't, but it doesn't matter what they think anymore. We proved ourselves at New Montana. We proved ourselves today. The galaxy is going to have to get used to the idea that humanity isn't going anywhere. Back on Earth, in a secure facility beneath the mountains of Colorado, the scientists of Project Dark Matter watched the Council proceedings on their screens. Dr. Helen Yu, the director of the project, smiled as she saw the vote count. We did it, she said to her team. We actually did it. Her deputy, Dr. Frank Lee, shook his head in amazement. 3 years ago, half the scientific community said this was impossible. Now we have 7 warships that just changed the balance of galactic power. 7 operational ships, Helen corrected. We have 8 more in various stages of construction, and now that we don't have to hide what we're doing, we can accelerate production. The team celebrated quietly, aware that their work was far from over. The Devourers were still out there. The Council civilizations would eventually try to steal or copy their technology, and there would be other threats, other challenges. But for now, humanity had proven something important. They had proven that being young and inexperienced wasn't the same as being weak. They had proven that sometimes, the best advantage was not knowing what was impossible until after you had already done it. The dark matter warships continued their silent patrol, 7 points of invisible light in the darkness of space. And the galaxy learned a lesson it would not soon forget. Never underestimate the species fighting for its survival. 3 weeks had passed since the Council vote, and Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Lincoln's Pride, watching the stars bend around her ship as they traveled through dark space. It was still strange to her, even after months of commanding the vessel. Dark space wasn't hyperspace, wasn't normal space. It was something else entirely, a dimension that existed between the cracks of reality. "Admiral, we're approaching the Helios cluster," Lieutenant Ben Clark reported from the communications station. "The Krethian Defense Fleet is requesting our coordinates. Send them our approach vector. Tell them we'll be dropping into normal space in 10 minutes. Kate walked across the bridge, her boots silent on the dark metal floor. The Lincoln's Pride was beautiful in a way that made her uncomfortable sometimes. Every surface seemed to shift slightly when you looked at it, as if the ship existed in more than 3 dimensions. The walls hummed with power that she could feel in her bones. She had been an engineer before all this, designing theoretical propulsion systems that most people thought were impossible. When Project Dark Matter started, they recruited her because she had published a paper on quantum field manipulation that everyone else had dismissed as fantasy. Turned out fantasy was just science that nobody had figured out yet. "Status on the other ships?" Kate asked. "The Liberty's Dawn and Freedom's Call are holding position at coordinates Beta 7, Commander Peter Lang replied from the tactical station. "The Montana's Revenge and the Earth's Shield are sweeping the outer system for Devourer scouts. No contacts yet. Good. Let's keep it that way." The Helios cluster was home to 3 Krethian core worlds, with a combined population of 15 billion. Intelligence reports said the Devourers were massing for an attack, gathering 3 separate swarm fleets for a coordinated strike. If the cluster fell, it would open a direct path to the heart of Krethian space. Kate had 200 Krethian warships under her tactical command, along with 4 human dark matter vessels. It sounded like a lot until you realized they were facing somewhere between 5 and 10,000 Devourer ships. "Dropping to normal space in 30 seconds, Ben announced. Kate sat in her command chair and pulled up the tactical display. It showed the Helios system in perfect detail, every planet and asteroid and ship rendered in 3 dimensions. The Krethian fleet was arranged in a defensive sphere around the primary world, their formation textbook perfect. The Lincoln's Pride emerged from dark space with barely a ripple. One moment they were nowhere, the next they were there, sliding into position above the Krethian fleet. Kate opened a channel to the Krethian commander. "Admiral Thex, this is Admiral Sullivan. We're in position and ready to coordinate." The Krethian admiral's face appeared on the main screen. Thex was old by his species standards, his scaled skin showing the scars of 100 battles. He had been fighting wars when Kate's grandparents were still children. "Admiral Sullivan, welcome to Helios. Your other ships, spreading out to cover the likely approach vectors. Admiral, I've reviewed your defensive formation. It's well designed for facing a conventional fleet, but the Devourers don't fight conventionally." Thex's expression was hard to read, but Kate thought she detected irritation. "I have commanded fleets for 80 years, Admiral. I understand tactics." "I'm sure you do, sir. But you've never faced an enemy that can adapt to any weapon in real time. Your formation puts too many ships in close proximity. When the Devourers learn to counter your shields, and they will, they'll tear through your lines." There was a long pause. Kate waited, knowing she was walking a diplomatic tightrope. The Crethians were proud warriors with a military tradition that went back thousands of years. Being told how to fight by a human who had been an admiral for less than a year was insulting. Thex was also smart enough to know that pride was a luxury they couldn't afford. "What do you suggest?" he asked finally. "Spread your fleet into smaller groups. Make them work for every ship they destroy. Use your speed and maneuverability to stay ahead of their adaptation curve. And most importantly, let my ships take the first contact. We need to thin their numbers before they reach your forces." Thex considered this. "You would place your 4 ships between my fleet and thousands of devourers." "That's why we're here, Admiral." Another pause, then Thex nodded. "Very well, we will adjust our formation. But Admiral Sullivan, my ships will not hide behind yours. We will fight." "I wouldn't expect anything less, sir." Over the next 2 hours, the Crethian fleet repositioned according to Kate's plan. The ships formed into 20 separate battle groups, each one capable of independent action. The human dark matter vessels took up positions in the outer system, ready to intercept the Devourers before they could reach the inner planets. Kate used the time to check in with her other captains. Ryan Bell on the Liberty's Dawn reported no activity in his sector. Captain Jenny Brooks on the Freedom's call had detected some unusual gravitational readings that might be Devourer scouts, but nothing confirmed. "Stay alert," Kate told them. "Intelligence says they're coming today, but the Devourers don't follow schedules." She was reviewing supply reports when the alarm went off. "Contact," Ben's voice was sharp. "Multiple hyperspace signatures, Sector 9, it's them." Kate pulled up the tactical display. Red icons were appearing by the dozens, then by the hundreds. The Devourers were coming out of hyperspace in a massive coordinated jump, their entire fleet arriving at once. "Give me numbers," Kate ordered. "Still counting." "Estimate 4,000 ships so far, still more arriving." 4,000. Kate felt her stomach tighten. Even with dark matter weapons, those were bad odds. All ships battle stations. Human vessels move to intercept positions Alpha through Delta. Crethian fleet, hold defensive formation until my mark. The Lincoln's Pride accelerated, dark matter engines pushing the ship to speeds that would tear apart a normal vessel. Kate watched her tactical display as the other human ships moved into position, forming a screen between the Devourers and the Crethian fleet. The Devourers had formed into 3 massive swarms, each one a living mass of biomechanical ships that moved with eerie coordination. They were accelerating toward the inner system, their formation tight and efficient. "Distance to contact, 4 minutes, Peter reported. Kate opened a fleet-wide channel. "All Crethian vessels, listen carefully. When the engagement starts, you're going to see things you've never seen before. Do not break formation. Do not attempt to support us until I give the order. Our weapons create spatial distortions that can damage friendly ships if you're too close. Stay in your positions and be ready to move when the swarms break apart." She could see the Crethian ships holding steady, though she imagined their crews were nervous. They were used to being the strongest fleet in any engagement. Now they were being told to hold back, while 4 human ships faced an enemy that had destroyed civilizations. 2 minutes to contact. Kate pulled up her weapons display. The Lincoln's Pride had 6 primary dark matter cannons and dozens of smaller point defense systems. Each cannon could fire a beam that would tear through normal matter like it wasn't there, disrupting the atomic bonds that held ships together. But the Devourers weren't normal matter. They were part organic, part machine, and they could adapt to almost any weapon. Kate had studied the reports from other battles. The Devourers learned fast, sometimes within minutes. If you hit them with the same attack twice, the second time would be less effective. That's why the dark matter weapons worked. They didn't attack in a conventional way. They manipulated the fundamental forces of reality itself. There was nothing to adapt to, no pattern to learn. You couldn't evolve a defense against having your atomic structure unmade. 1 minute. The Devourers were close enough now that Kate could see them on visual sensors. They looked like nightmares, ships made of twisted metal and pulsing organic tissue. Some were small, no bigger than fighters. Others were massive, the size of cruisers. They all moved together, the swarm acting as one. "All ships, weapons free. Target the lead elements of each swarm. Fire on my mark." The seconds ticked down. Kate watched the distance shrink on her display. She waited until the Devourers were almost in range of their own weapons. Mark, fire! The Lincoln's Pride opened up with all 6 primary cannons, beams of dark energy, visible only because of how they distorted space around them, lanced out toward the Devourer swarm. Where they hit, ships simply ceased to exist. The other 3 human vessels fired at the same moment. 12 beams of impossible energy tore into the Devourer fleet. The lead elements of all 3 swarms vanished, hundreds of ships destroyed in the first second of combat. The Devourers reacted immediately. The swarms broke apart, spreading out to present more difficult targets. Some ships accelerated, trying to close the distance. Others fell back, attempting to analyze the new threat. Kate watched the pattern shifts with professional interest. The Devourer hive mind was smart. She had to give it that. It recognized that clustering was fatal and adjusted accordingly. Concentrate fire on Swarm Alpha. I want to break their formation completely. The Lincoln's Pride focused all its weapons on the center mass of the closest Devourer swarm. The dark matter beams swept through space like searchlights of destruction. Devourer ships exploded, disintegrated, or simply vanished. The swarm tried to scatter, but the human ships were faster. Contact left flank, Ben called out. Swarm Beta is trying to flank us. Freedom's call, break off and intercept. Don't let them get past you. Captain Jenny Brooks acknowledged, and her ship peeled away, accelerating to cut off the flanking maneuver. Kate saw the Freedom's call position itself between the Devourers and the inner system, its weapons already firing. The battle turned into a deadly dance. The human ships moved through space with impossible agility, their dark matter engines allowing them to change direction in ways that violated momentum. The Devourers swarmed like angry insects, trying to overwhelm through sheer numbers. But numbers didn't matter when each shot from a human ship could destroy dozens of targets. Kate lost herself in the rhythm of combat. Target fire move, target fire move. The Lincoln's Pride's weapons never stopped, beams of dark energy sweeping through the Devourer formations like a scythe through wheat. Admiral Swarm Alpha is breaking up, Peter reported. They're falling back. Kate checked her display. The first Devourer swarm had lost nearly half its ships and was retreating toward the system's edge. But swarms Beta and Gamma were still pressing the attack. Don't let them regroup. Liberty's Dawn, Montana's Revenge, pursue Swarm Alpha. I want them out of this system. Ryan Bell's voice came through clear and confident. On it, Admiral. They won't get far. Kate focused on the remaining swarms. They were adapting their tactics now, trying to use asteroids and debris as cover. It didn't help much. The dark matter weapons could punch through solid rock as easily as vacuum. Admiral, the Crethian fleet is requesting permission to engage, Ben said. Kate looked at her tactical display. The Devourers had been so focused on the human ships that they had ignored the Crethian fleet entirely. Now Swarm Gamma was moving in a vector that would bring them within range of Admiral Thex's forces. Granted, tell Admiral Thex he's clear to engage Swarm Gamma. But warn him to stay clear of our firing solutions. The Crethian fleet surged forward, 200 warships accelerating to attack speed. Their formation was perfect, each battle group moving in coordination with the others. Kate had to admit it was impressive. The Crethians opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic projectiles, all of it hammering into the Devourer swarm. The biomechanical ships shuddered under the assault, their shields flaring. For about 30 seconds, it looked like the Crethian weapons were working. Then the Devourers adapted. Kate saw it happening on her sensors. The Devourer ships were analyzing the Crethian weapons, learning their frequencies and patterns. Within a minute, their shields had adjusted. The energy beams that had been tearing through them started splashing harmlessly off their hulls. Admiral Thex, adjust your weapon frequencies, Kate transmitted. They're adapting to your current settings. The Crethian fleet tried, their ships cycling through different weapon configurations. But the Devourers learned faster than the Crethians could adjust. Within 3 minutes, Swarm Gamma had become effectively immune to everything the Crethian fleet could throw at them. Now the Devourers counterattacked. Biomechanical weapons, things that looked like they were grown rather than built, opened fire on the Crethian ships. The attacks were precise and devastating. Shields failed. Hulls ruptured. Ships that had survived dozens of battles died in seconds. Thex is calling for support, Ben said urgently. Kate was already moving. Peter, plot intercept course for Swarm Gamma, emergency speed. The Lincoln's Pride dove into the middle of the engagement, its dark matter weapons blazing. Kate targeted the Devourers that were closest to the Krethian ships, clearing space around the damaged vessels. All Krethian forces fall back to defensive positions. We'll cover your retreat. Admiral Thex's face appeared on her screen and Kate could see the frustration there. Admiral Sullivan, my fleet can still fight. Your fleet just lost 12 ships in 3 minutes, Admiral. Fall back. Let us handle this. There was a moment of tense silence. Then Thex nodded curtly. Retreating, but this is not acceptable, Admiral. My warriors do not run from battle. They're not running, they're repositioning. There's a difference. The Krethian fleet pulled back in good order, their damaged ships protected by the healthier ones. Kate kept the Lincoln's Pride between them and the Devourers, her weapons creating a wall of destructive energy that nothing could pass. Swarm Gamma tried to pursue, but Kate wasn't having it. She concentrated all her fire on their lead elements, cutting them down so fast that the swarm finally broke and scattered. Peter, status on the other swarms. Alpha is completely destroyed. Liberty's Dawn and Montana's Revenge are mopping up the stragglers. Beta is retreating toward the outer system. Freedom's Call is in pursuit. Kate checked her ammunition levels. The dark matter weapons didn't use conventional ammunition, but they did draw enormous amounts of power. The Lincoln's Pride's reactors were running at 70% capacity, which meant they could keep fighting for hours if needed. All ships, reform defensive screen. Don't let any of them escape to report back to the main Devourer fleet. The next hour was brutal work. The human ships hunted down the scattered Devourer vessels, eliminating them one by one. Kate knew it was necessary. If even one ship escaped, it would carry information about the human weapons back to the hive mind. The Devourers would analyze that data, share it with every other swarm, and start looking for countermeasures. So far, humanity's advantage depended on the Devourers not understanding how dark matter weapons worked. Kate wanted to keep it that way as long as possible. By the time the last Devourer ship was destroyed, Kate's crew was exhausted. They had been at battle stations for 4 hours straight, fighting one of the most intense engagements any of them had ever experienced. All clear, Admiral, Ben reported. No remaining Devourer signatures in the system. Kate leaned back in her command chair, feeling the tension drain from her shoulders. Good work, everyone. Stand down from battle stations. Maintain alert status. She opened a channel to Admiral Thex. The Krethian admiral looked tired and angry in equal measure. Admiral Sullivan, your ships performed adequately. Kate smiled despite herself. That was probably the closest thing to praise she was going to get from Thex. Thank you, Admiral. How are your casualties? 15 ships destroyed, 31 damaged, 3,000 warriors dead. Thex's voice was heavy with grief. Against a conventional enemy, we would have won easily, but the Devourers are not conventional. No, they're not. That's why you need to adjust your tactics. Your weapons are effective for about 1 minute before they adapt. You need to hit them hard in that first minute, then disengage before they can counter. Thex was quiet for a moment. Kate could see him struggling with the reality of the situation. The Krethians were warriors bred for combat over thousands of generations. Being told they needed to run from a fight went against everything in their culture. It is difficult, Thex said finally, to accept that we cannot stand and fight. I understand, Admiral, but there's no shame in smart tactics. You save more lives by being clever than by being brave. Perhaps, but it does not feel like victory. Kate thought about how to respond to that. She remembered her own frustration during the early days of Project Dark Matter when they lost prototype after prototype. The scientists had wanted to slow down, to analyze each failure carefully. But Kate had pushed them to move faster, to take risks, because she knew the Devourers were coming. Admiral Thex, let me tell you something about humans. We're not the strongest species. We're not the smartest or the oldest. But we're really good at one thing: we adapt. When something doesn't work, we try something else. We don't worry about tradition or pride or what we're supposed to do. We worry about what actually works. Thex considered this. You are saying my pride is making me a poor commander. I'm saying that pride is expensive right now. You can have pride or you can have victory. Choose victory." The Crethian admiral was silent for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "You are wise for one so young, Admiral Sullivan. I will consider your words." The channel closed. Peter walked over to Kate's chair, his expression thoughtful. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "Thex is a legend among the Crethians. Getting him to admit weakness is no small thing. He's not weak. He's just fighting the last war instead of this one. A lot of the Council species are making that mistake." Kate pulled up the strategic map of the sector. The Helios cluster was secure for now, but there were dozens of other systems under threat. The Devourers were probing the Council's defenses across a front that stretched for hundreds of light years. "How many dark matter ships do we have operational now?" Kate asked. 7 in active service. 3 more coming online in the next month. After that, production should accelerate now that we're not trying to hide what we're doing. 7 ships to defend an entire galactic sector. Kate felt the weight of that responsibility. People were depending on them, billions of lives hanging on whether the human fleet could be in the right place at the right time. "Get me a meeting with the other captains. We need to coordinate our deployments better. And I want to talk to Admiral Thex about joint training exercises. If the Council fleets are going to be effective against the Devourers, they need to learn new tactics." Over the next few days, Kate held a series of meetings with both human and alien commanders. The conversations were difficult. Many of the Council species didn't want to admit that their traditional military doctrine was useless against the Devourers. They had spent millions of years perfecting the art of war, and now a species barely capable of spaceflight 2 years ago was telling them they needed to start over. But the battle at Helios had made an impression. Word spread quickly through the Council fleets about how the Crethian ships had been helpless while the human vessels tore through the Devourers. Some commanders were angry about it. Others were curious. A few were smart enough to be worried. Admiral Luis Garcia of the Earth's Shield was one of Kate's captains, a former Navy officer who had transitioned to Space Command. He met with Kate in person when his ship docked at a Council station for resupply. "The Council admirals are scared," Lewis said as they sat in Kate's quarters. "They're used to being the big players. Now they're realizing they're obsolete." "They're not obsolete," Kate corrected. "They're still useful for logistics, occupation, patrol duties. They just can't fight the Devourers directly. Try telling them that. Half of them think we're making them look bad on purpose." Kate sighed. "Are we making them look bad?" "Honestly, yes, but it's not intentional. We're just better at this specific job than they are." It was true, and Kate knew it. The dark matter ships had been designed for one purpose: killing Devourers. They were extremely good at that task, but they weren't perfect. They couldn't be everywhere at once. They needed support, supplies, intelligence. The Council provided all of that. Without the vast infrastructure of the galactic civilizations, the human fleet would have been limited to defending Earth and its immediate colonies. With Council support, they could project power across the entire sector. "We need to make the Council admirals feel useful," Kate said. "Give them missions they can succeed at. Let them have their victories." Lewis nodded. "Political warfare, not my favorite kind, but I see your point. It's not politics, it's reality. We need them as much as they need us. We just need them to remember that." 3 weeks after the battle at Helios, Kate received a priority message from Earth. It was from Dr. Helen Yu, the director of Project Dark Matter. "Admiral Sullivan, I wanted to update you on our production timeline. We've completed 3 more dark matter warships and have 5 more in final assembly. At current pace, we'll have 20 operational vessels within 6 months, 20 ships." Kate felt a surge of hope. That would be enough to make a real difference, to go on the offensive instead of just reacting to Devourer attacks. "That's excellent news, Doctor. What about the training pipeline for crews?" Helen's expression darkened slightly. "That's more difficult. Operating a dark matter ship requires specific skills that take time to develop. We're training as fast as we can, but the cognitive requirements are significant. Not everyone can handle the sensory feedback from the dark matter engines." Kate knew what she meant. Piloting a dark matter ship was unlike anything else. You had to learn to perceive space in dimensions that human brains weren't designed to understand. Some people adapted quickly. Others never did, no matter how much training they received. Do what you can, Doctor. Every ship we can field makes a difference. After the call ended, Kate sat in her quarters, thinking about the future. The war against the Devourers was far from over. Intelligence suggested there were hundreds of swarm fleets still out there, consuming worlds and growing stronger. Humanity had won some battles, but the campaign would last years. And then there was the other problem, the council species themselves. They were grateful for human help, but gratitude only went so far. Some civilizations were already trying to steal dark matter technology. Others were demanding that Earth share its research. A few were quietly making contingency plans for what would happen if humanity ever turned its weapons against the Council itself. Kate couldn't blame them for being worried. The dark matter warships represented a complete shift in the galactic balance of power. For 10,000 years, the Council had maintained stability through careful management of technology and military strength. Now humanity had upset that balance in less than a year. There would be consequences. Kate just hoped they could handle them when they came. A chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Commander Peter Lang entered, carrying a data pad. "Admiral, you need to see this. We just received intelligence from Council sources. The Devourers are massing a major fleet in the Outer Rim. Estimates range from 50 to 100,000 ships." Kate felt her blood run cold. Target: unknown, but if they move toward Council space, there's only one thing in their path that they'd need that many ships to attack. Kate understood immediately. Earth. "Yes, ma'am. They're going after our home system." Kate stood up, her mind already racing through tactical calculations. 7 human warships, soon to be 10, against 100,000 Devourers. The odds were impossible. But then the odds had been impossible at New Montana too. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Defense Command, and assemble all the captains for an emergency conference. We need to plan our defense." Peter saluted and left. Kate walked to the viewport in her quarters, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Devourer hive mind was planning its attack. They had learned about Earth, learned that the human homeworld was the source of the dark matter ships, and they were coming to eliminate the threat. Kate smiled grimly. Let them come. The Devourers thought they were the apex predator of the galaxy, the unstoppable swarm that consumed everything in its path. They had never faced a species that refused to accept defeat, that turned impossible odds into motivation rather than despair. The Devourers were about to learn what humans could do when their backs were against the wall, and Kate Sullivan was going to enjoy teaching them that lesson.